This video is an explanation of the reading comprehension passage about global warming. This could be watched in conjunction with any question about the passage, and of course each question is explained in its own video explanation. And I will say, if you're doing several questions on this passage, I would suggest not watching this video until you're done with all the questions. That way you're answering the questions with your own understanding of the passage. So let's talk about this passage. So the first paragraph, there are three paragraphs. The first one is very long, so it's split between two screens. People associate global warming with temperature, but the phrase is misleading. It fails to mention the relevance of water. Nearly every significant indicator of hydrological activity, rainfall, snowmelt, glacial melt, is changing at an accelerating pace. One can arbitrarily pick any point of the hydrological cycle and notice a disruption. One analysis pegged the increase in precipitation at 2% over the century. In water terms, this sounds auspicious, promising increased supply, but the changing timing and composition of the precipitation more than neutralizes the advantage. For one thing, it is likely that more of the precipitation will fall in intense episodes, with flooding a reasonable prospect. In addition, while rainfall will increase, snowfall will decrease. Such an outcome means that in watersheds that depend on snowmelt, such as the Indus, Ganges, Colorado River basins, less water will be stored as snow, and more of it will flow in the winter when it plays no agricultural road. Conversely, less of it will flow in the summer when it is most needed. One computer model showed that on the Animas River, an increase in temperature of 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit would cause runoff to rise by 85% from January to March, but drop by 40% from July to September. The rise in temperature increases the probability and intensity of spring floods and threatens dam safety, which is predicated on lower runoff projections. Dams in arid areas may also face increased sedimentation, since a 10% annual increase in precipitation can double the volume of sediments washed into rivers. And so this entire passage is talking about the problems associated with what is commonly known as global warming. And first of all, it suggests that the actual term global warming is a misleading term, that really the problems are about water and the cycle of water, what is called the hydrological cycle. That's a term used in this passage. And so it appears that what's going on is that where the water comes and how it comes is changing. And so the old pattern, there was snow in winter and rain in the summer. And that was very good because the rain in the summer would help the crops. And of course, the snow would be melting over the course of the year and there'd be a steady supply of water. Well, now if there's a lot of rain in the winter, then a lot of that is going to run so that all these rivers are going to be swollen and perhaps even flooding in the late winter and early spring. And then there'll be droughts in the summer when you need to grow crops. And so enormous problems right away. Second paragraph. The consequences multiply. In other words, it just gets worse. The consequences multiply. Soil moisture will intensify at the highest northern latitudes, where precipitation will grow far more than evaporation and plant transpiration, but where agriculture is non-existent. At the same time, precipitation will drop over northern mid-latitude continents in summer months, where ample soil moisture is an agricultural necessity. So in other words, you'll get moist soil on the tops of mountains, but nobody grows food there. But at all the places where people are actually growing the food, there's going to be less moisture. So that's not good. Meanwhile, sea levels will continue to rise as temperatures warm, accelerating saline contamination of freshwater aquifers and river deltas. The temperature will cause an increase in evaporation, which in turn will lead to greater incidence of drought. And so a number of bad consequences. And it goes on. Perhaps most disturbingly of all. So we've had bad things, but apparently this is going to be the worst here. The hydrological cycle is becoming increasingly unpredictable. This means that the last century's hydrological cycle, the set of assumptions about water on which modern irrigation is based, has become unreliable. Build a dam too large, and it may not generate its design power. Build it too small, and it may collapse or flood. And so there's the problem with how do we build a dam? And if we can't predict, we're going to have trouble building dams. Similarly, release too little dam runoff in the spring, and there might be a flood as the snowmelt cascades downstream with unexpected volume. Release too much because you're trying to not have a flood, and the water will not be available for farmers when they need it later in the year. And so, in other words, it's a lose-lose. If you guess wrong either way, it's going to be a problem. And because it's becoming unreliable, we're not even going to know which way to guess. We won't know if we're guessing one way or the other way, whether that's a good thing or not. At a time when water scarcity calls out for intensified planning, planning itself may be stymied. And so that's particularly bad if we realize that we have to make plans, but the nature of the unpredictability is preventing us from making proper plans.